Welcome back to The Explainer. So let's dive right into this because we're looking at something absolutely massive today. The 2026 FIFA Men's World Cup is going to the United States, Mexico, and Canada. But we aren't just going to look at this as a global sports phenomenon. We're going to examine it as a total masterclass in human resources, organizational design, and corporate dynamics. Because whether you're running a multinational corporation or managing a local team of 5, elite sports are essentially giant, high-stakes human systems. And where you have human systems, you have friction, triumphs, and incredibly valuable lessons.
Here's today's starting lineup. We're going to cover the World Cup playbook, making the tough calls, manager or prominent cog, navigating workplace grief, and modern Moneyball recruitment. Let's get to it.
All right, Part 1, the World Cup playbook, scale and stakes.
To really grasp the organizational lessons here, we've got to wrap our heads around the sheer magnitude of this tournament coming to our shores. Look at this number, 104. That's the staggering amount of games being played over just 6 weeks, representing 48 different national teams. I mean, think about it. Thousands of people from across the globe saving up for years just to be in the stands, let alone the insane logistics, staffing, and team management happening behind the scenes. It brilliantly shows that elite sports aren't just games. They are massive operations, dealing with intense pressure. And with that kind of scale, you get the exact same friction you face in your daily operations, just broadcast to billions of people.
Moving on to Section 2, making the tough calls, the roster snub.
So before anyone even steps onto the pitch for those 104 games, leaders have to actually build their teams. And that means preseason recruitment and, inevitably, some incredibly difficult communication. Let's look at the sober reality of the roster snub. Take the U.S. men's national team. There was immense hype leading into their final roster announcement in May of 2026. They'd been rebuilding with a younger squad, hoping to peak at home. But when the roster dropped, rising star Diego Luna, a total fan favorite whose path to the pros was built on sheer grit, was completely missing. And the truly wild part of all this, it was a tough hiring decision, sure, but he was notified via email. Seriously, the coach actually doubled down on this digital delivery method when pressed about it. Think about that for a second. Have you ever had to navigate delivering difficult HR news? If you lead people, you know sending a quick email is definitely the easiest way out, but it's rarely the right one. It's a stark reminder of how the medium of our communication impacts the message, especially when careers are literally on the line.
Okay, Section 3, manager or prominent cog, the leadership crisis.
To explore this crisis, we're going to pivot over to the English Premier League. There's this ongoing, intense debate over there about what we actually call our leaders and why it's driving massive turnover. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how perfectly it mirrors our modern corporate structures. In soccer, the old-school football manager was an autonomous visionary, the ultimate authority. But the modern head coach, they operate in a heavily divided structure, sharing responsibilities with data analysts, medical teams, recruitment directors, the whole shebang. Does this sound familiar? Because this is exactly what's happened in our matrixed corporate offices. We give people the title of manager, but limit their autonomy so heavily that they essentially operate as a supervisor of a very specific, narrow function.
Just read this quote from ESPN. It's a real ouch moment, right? A manager is a visionary to whom everyone must answer. A head coach is more of a prominent cog within a larger machine. Wow, who wakes up in the morning and aspires to be a prominent cog? Yet this is the exact tension squeezing leaders today. When a leader's actual structural authority doesn't match the grand expectations placed on them, the friction is immense. You're held responsible for the outcome, but you don't control the inputs. And what happens when leaders face that kind of systemic friction? They leave.
Just 1 to 2 years. Let me put that into perspective. In the 2025-2026 Premier League season alone, an astonishing 11 managers were fired out of just 20 teams. One guy lasted only 39 days. And while sports are famously volatile, corporate data from Zippia shows that the average supervisor tenure in the business world has plummeted to this exact same timeline, 1 to 2 years. Constant leadership shifts fracture team dynamics, and honestly, they just destroy trust.
So the crucial takeaway here is that the leadership playbook from 2019, it's completely obsolete. Today's managers are caught in what we can call the modern supervisor squeeze. They're trying to manage incredibly complex hybrid and remote teams. Employees are rightfully asking for more empathy and personal connection. Plus, we're rapidly approaching a reality where a manager's span of control will include managing 6 to 8 human employees alongside 6 to 8 AI agents. Organizations are quietly, and quite frankly desperately, rewriting the manager role to handle this rapidly flattening structure. If we don't figure out how to support these prominent cogs, the turnover is only going to accelerate.
Which brings us to Section 4, Navigating Workplace Grief, the Invisible Weight.
We need to drop the pace a little bit here, because we really must talk about the deeply human and often tragic realities that team systems face behind closed doors. Teams are inherently human, right? Which means they are vulnerable to sudden, devastating loss. Back in 2025, the global soccer community was rocked by the tragic deaths of Portuguese stars Diogo Jota and Andre Silva in a car accident. Jota had just won a Premier League title with Liverpool. He was literally the emotional heartbeat of that club. When the next season started, the club honored him with murals. But as the season wore on, Liverpool's performance just plummeted, and their coach was fired. The public naturally blamed tactics. But the reality? It wasn't a tactical failure. It was a team desperately trying to outrun its sorrow.
Listen to this incredibly raw definition from one of Jota's former teammates who opened up about the severe depression he battled following the accident. He said, "It starts in the heart, goes up to the brain, and takes over your whole body." It really challenges the myth that success or a massive salary somehow shields you from pain. In the corporate world, our first instinct is usually to grant 3 days of bereavement leave and just assume that if an employee logs back onto Slack or steps back into the office, they're okay. But as we all know, grief doesn't follow a corporate timeline.
Let these words sit with you for a moment. Right now, workplaces are talking endlessly about burnout. But much of what we label as burnout is actually unaddressed, accumulated grief. When a team loses someone, they lose a piece of their daily culture. And we're going to see this hidden grief play out on a global stage, as Portugal enters the 2026 World Cup under a really heavy shadow, with the anniversary of Jota's passing landing right in the middle of the tournament. As leaders, we've got to stop just building memorials or sending a card and start actively, continuously checking on the teammates left behind. We have to allow our teams the space to actually heal.
All right, Section 5, Modern Moneyball Recruitment, Finding Hidden Talent.
Let's bring the energy back up a bit as we transition from how we care for the team internally to how we build the team externally. Here's your recruitment reality check. In elite soccer, just like in business, securing top-tier proven talent requires a massive financial investment. The biggest clubs just buy the best players. Smaller clubs, like Brentford FC in the Premier League, operate at a huge financial disadvantage. Does that sound a bit like your small business or nonprofit? You simply can't outspend the giants. On top of that, traditional job boards are largely broken for roles paying under $100,000. They usually just yield unresponsive candidates or geographical mismatches. And let me be absolutely clear, passively hoping that great candidates will compromise on salary just because you have a great mission is not a recruitment strategy.
So what do? Well, you adopt the Moneyball approach. You step outside your comfort zone and you look where your competitors aren't looking. This means building a continuous pipeline. First, stop relying solely on Indeed and start deploying targeted Instagram ads right where your community actually spends their time. Second, engage directly in local Facebook groups. You need to be present where the local talent pool is already gathering online. And third, build paid internships to cultivate that next generation. It's all about acting like you are always recruiting. The passive candidate casually reading your website today, that's your best applicant next year.
And that brings us to our final thought. Recruitment is basically like a garden. If you want to harvest tomorrow, what seeds are you planting today? You see, the 2026 World Cup is going to be a spectacular display of athletic talent for sure. But if you look closely, it's also a fascinating mirror reflecting how we lead, how we communicate, how we grieve, and how we build our organizations. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Take these global playbook lessons, plant those seeds in your own workplace today, and I'll see you next time.